Hello there, welcome to another edition of Matt's Chats. This is a series of short videos where I sit and talk to people in and around the whisky industry to try and bring it to life a little bit. And I'm delighted to be here today with Aimee Morrison, who is a whisky specialist at Johnnie Walker. Thank you, Aimee, for speaking to me. And we're here at a very special event, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But can you just explain to people that maybe don't know, what is a whisky specialist at Johnnie Walker? What does that involve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really pleased to be here with you today, Matt, but I'm one of a small team of 12 whisky blenders for Johnnie Walker, and ultimately we're responsible as a team for looking after the maturing stock in our inventory to make sure that it matures as we would hope it would be and that it's as expected. We look after all of the products that we are currently producing to make sure that the quality of those products is as we would want them to be, and that as the consumer would be expecting them to be as well, that the quality is spot on every time. And we also blend for the future as well, so we're doing innovations and we're laying down stock for future innovations. So that's what we do across the whole of the whisky team for 12 members of it.
That's not an insignificant role, is it? Because you have things like Johnnie Walker Black, Johnnie Walker Red Label, Blue Label, and so on, which are, the best-selling Scotch whiskies in the world.
That's it. It's no mean feat to become the world's #1 Scotch whisky, as we have with Johnnie Walker. So we have such a diverse role, and no 2 days are the same. We get involved in lots of different things. We get to talk to consumers, we get to help educate around the whisky world, we get to share our knowledge, but also share our wonderful flavours of Johnnie Walker products too.
And how did you get into sort of blending whisky? How did you sort of find your way into the industry and sort of get to where you are today?
I actually started my journey with Diageo and with Johnnie Walker as an industrial placement. So I did a master's in chemistry at university, and I was fortunate enough that the last year of my university course was actually an industrial placement, and lucky enough to get one with Diageo in the whisky specialist team. And that really began my journey essentially. It sparked the idea of creativity and the passion for me in the world of whisky. And once I graduated, I was fortunate enough that Diageo were able to keep me on and wanted to keep me on. I had a couple of different roles. I worked in analysis for a little while, and I worked in liquid development for a little while, and that helped to develop my analytical skills and also my flavour understanding. But really, in the heart of hearts, I knew that I wanted to come back to the world of whisky if I could. A job became available, and I've been back in the team ever since, so that's 10 years as a whisky blender now.
Yeah, great. So did you have an interest in whisky before? Or did that come literally from that placement and you were like, oh, I can use my skills to work in this industry?
I think I had an interest for flavour and ingredients and how things come together before I understood more around the world of whisky. But I think it's fair to say that the passion really began as I joined the whisky team and I realised what world there was available to us, the world of flavour, the world of blending, and the world of experimentation, and how that could be taken forward as well. So that really was the start of my journey essentially.
And I guess working with a sort of legendary figure like Jim Beveridge, now retired, but that must have had an influence on you as well.
Absolutely. Been really fortunate to work with so many wonderful people in the whisky specialist team. Had a few people that have retired recently, like Jim, as you mentioned, but actually to be able to share an office alongside Jim, to be able to learn from him day by day, not just around blending but philosophies when it comes to whisky. That's priceless really. But I think it's lovely because actually we've got that lineage now, and Dr. Emma Walker is our master blender for Johnnie Walker just now, and we share the same philosophies because the principles are the same, quality and flavour at the top of those. But actually the intricacies and how we go about those are maybe slightly different, so it's nice to see the individualities from Jim to Emma and how that's shared across the team.
And that leads us on quite nicely to why we're here today in central London for the launch of Johnnie Walker 52 years old, which is Emma Walker's sort of oldest prestige release of Johnnie Walker to date, isn't it?
That's right, it's her first ultra rare release of Johnnie Walker with Emma Walker's name on it, which is a wonderful achievement.
And what can you tell us about this as a whisky?
Yeah,
We've got a little sample of it right here.
We do indeed.
Actually,
it feels wrong not to pick it up and
it does,
have
actually,
a nose of it
yeah,
as we're talking around it.
Tiny little bit left here.
So this is Johnnie Walker 52 years old, a blended Scotch whisky, natural cask strength at 41.2% in ABV.
So it just made it.
It has, yeah.
Yeah.
And this whisky has been created to showcase the artistry of blending, essentially. And I like to think of that as blending of today, but also blending of the past as well. And what we wanted to do was actually to honour members of who created Johnnie Walker, essentially. So John Walker and his son Alexander, they were at the forefront of the blending era and the philosophies that would have been created around that blending period of time. So we wanted to be able to create a whisky that honours them and the art of blending that goes alongside that. And hopefully you'll agree that that's what we've been able to do with this 52-year-old release.
And I think we should probably have a little smell and a taste, shouldn't we?
I think so.
So I know that there's only 200 bottles of this, so you know the likelihood of anyone, you know, you're going to have 200 people that sort of buy this and get to taste it, obviously with their friends and whatever as well. But just for people, what are you sort of finding, sort of on the nose and the taste here?
Yeah.
I managed to save a tiny little bit. From
You
the
did a good
previous
job.
tasting. It's hard, but.
So I think this is a wonderfully rich, harmonious and complex blend with lots of depth of flavour. There's lots going on here, and it's almost like a journey through time as well. It's a whisky that keeps on giving the more you go back to it. But I think the first thing that really comes out at me is the intense fruitiness that this whisky has. And there's different layers of fruit flavours in there. So I think about juicy fruits, I think of currants, I think of stewed plums. They're the types of aromas that really jump out at me to start with.
That's quite difficult to, you know, older whiskies, they can get very woody very quickly. So it has a sort of vibrancy and yet an elegance that, you know, sort of belies its age almost, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for us as blenders working with a whisky that is of this age, because you have to balance so many different things. Ultimately, we want the distillery characters to still come through and to be present, and we want there to be layers of flavour rather than it being dominated by a woodiness, as you mentioned. So that's what we really look to do and put a lot of time and effort into achieving that in the labs. And the way that we go about doing that is bringing in cask samples, essentially. We look to the stocks to see what's available for us, and as you can imagine, at 52 years of age, that's very limited, very very rare whiskies that are going into this. I was going to
say, how on earth do you start to put together, because there can't firstly be very many casks of that age, or of the quality that you are wanting to put into something like this sort of exquisitely aged release. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, we it's a team effort ultimately, but I worked really closely with Emma on this, so we have a great understanding of the stock, the casks that are available at that age, which, as you said, there's not very many of those left available, and we have an idea of those which we feel will have the correct flavour that we would want to include in the blend. So we would ask for cask samples to be taken of those individual casks. They would arrive in the blending lab back at Menstrie, and ultimately we would do a large screening exercise. I say large, relatively. We would do a screening exercise to see whether the flavour profile of those casks actually is what we would expect them to be. Have they changed any since the last time we reviewed them? So we would assess those at cask strength, and then we would assess them at a reduced strength, typically around 23%. And that gives us a starting to understand the different building blocks that might be available to us as we come to bring together the 52-year-old.
Is it a different approach to blending younger whiskies, to say like the Black Label or a limited edition of one of the younger styles of Johnnie Walker? Is it a different approach, or are there similar, I'm guessing similar principles?
Yeah, I would say...
But you're just using much older whiskey.
Yeah, I would say similar principles, but for me the main thing is that around this kind of age, each individual cask of whiskey has its own individuality, has its own personality, and you want elements of that personality to shine through in the overall blend. So it's important to find the right balance between those, essentially. So each individual cask becomes like a blending building block almost, and that's the difference for me of a whiskey of this age.
And what sort of highlight distilleries would you say are in this blend? Can you tell me?
Yeah, one of the wonderful things around this whiskey actually is that we wanted to be quite transparent around the whiskies that we've included in the blend. So we've actually got 8 different distilleries that are
There's a little bit of
involved.
smoke in there, isn't there? Just
There is, very good.
subtle in the background.
So this has actually been introduced from a couple of different whiskies, but the main of those being Brora.
Right.
So one of our long-closed ghost distilleries that would have been 52 years at least to go into this blend. And that introduces a lovely wood smoke, I feel. It's almost like the salinity, it's almost like a wood fire. It's the embers that have been dying away in the background, almost drifting in the air, that kind of wood smoke.
It's not like an Isla smoke, is it? No,
it's
really.
quite soft, quite subtle. It's nicely integrated with the blend. But we have a couple of other whiskies that would have been inherently smoky when they were produced as well, and that's Glenalbyn and Dalwhinnie. So they help to build some of this.
Dalwhinnie, really?
Yeah, some of the salinity and the ozone effect that you kind of see in some of the menthol character in this whiskey.
So Glenalbyn's closed, right?
Yes, that's right. Closed.
But Dalwhinnie now you don't really associate with smokiness at all. So
no.
Would it be back in the day they would have had a sort of small amount of peat smoke?
That's right, just an inherent
drying the barley.
Yeah, just an inherent smokiness. So we find that kind of salinity is carried through. Even though it's 52 years old, it's definitely still present as a slight pepperiness in the whiskey that we have today.
And any other like closed distilleries or sort of hidden gems sort of in there that you might?
A couple for me are actually, we've got Highland single malt whiskies in this blend and Lowland single grain whiskies, and the single grain whiskies that we've included are Cambus and Castbridge, which I feel are wonderful expressions because they have such an age to them. They bring a rich butterscotch, vanilla spiciness to it, but they also bring a lovely fruitiness, which I think is quite unexpected for a grain. And it's because it's been allowed to age for so long that fruitiness has been able to develop. It's almost like black currants, like a confectionery fruitiness that comes through. And I think that carries through really nicely in the overall blend.
Quite often people say black currant, but it's only really associated with much older whiskies, so that's obviously something that develops. Sort of younger whiskies maybe have. Oh dear, what happened to the lighting? This is what we love about doing these videos in one take. Just
automatically at this time you go to the evening mode.
Stuff nothing.
I go back to bright.
Please, yeah, we're just filming.
Sorry.
It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not me. It's automatically the
It's okay.
We're
automatic.
We're back.
This is what I love about these videos, because basically I do my allotment dram where I sit on my allotment as well, and like a plane will go over, or a fox will walk past, or the old boy on the next plot will walk past.
You can't plan for things like that.
But this is the beauty of doing everything in one take with no script. So anyway, we love this type of stuff. But
it gives us more of a chance to appreciate the whiskey that's in front of us. Yeah,
where were we?
We were talking around Cambus and Castbridge and the black currant effect.
Yes.
And it's only been allowed to develop because of time and age and the maturity. So the oxidative effect and the interaction between the compounds that are in the whiskey.
And you can't ever recreate that in younger whiskies, right? So, well, it's been a real privilege to firstly be here and try this whiskey, but also to talk to you. I know we were trying to work out when the last time we met was, but it's probably before COVID or.
It's been a few years at least, but feels like no time at all.
Yeah, but thank you so much for speaking to me and for introducing us to this whiskey, and so great to talk.
Great, thank you very much.
Aimee.
Keep walking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.